And the second thing what they did is that just 2 days before, they consulted with the FIFA committee and they said that we will not allow the sale of alcohol in the football stadiums. And then they had a contract with an alcohol company, the Budweiser, and of course, if 2 days before they stopped the sales, it is breach of contract. So Qatar asked them that what will be your revenue? What would be your sales? Forget the profit. What would be your sales in all these 29 days? Because they were allowed to sell beer or alcohol in the World Cup. So they said about $70 million. And Qatar said, fine, we will give you $70 million. So where is the question of loss? So Qatar gave $70 million to Budweiser and told them to keep the alcohol. We don't want the alcohol, you can keep it. Or don't get it here. Imagine they have spent $70 million for a work which is alhamdulillah. That they gave a demonstration that first time in the history of FIFA World Cup that alcohol wasn't sold in the stadiums. And no one could object because the contract, they said, we will pay you the complete revenue, forget the profit. What you expect to sell in all the stadiums in 29 days, we will pay you before the World Cup starts. And they agreed to pay and the matter was settled.
अस्सलामु अलैकुम वरहमतुल्लाहि वबरकातुहू। दोस्तों, उम्मीद करता हूँ आप सब खैरियत से होंगे और अपनी आखिरत की भरपूर तैयारी कर रहे होंगे। आज की एक और अफसोसनाक वीडियो में आप सबको खुशामदीद। दोस्तों, ये वीडियो एक पोस्ट के देखने के बाद मैंने बनाने का फ़ैसला किया क्योंकि इसके बारे में अभी तक किसी भी मीडिया ने कोई बात नहीं कही। जैसा कि आप लोगों ने देख लिया दोस्तों कि डॉक्टर जाकिर नाइक ने एक वाक़या बयान किया कतर वालों का, जहाँ पर उन्होंने फ़ुटबॉल वर्ल्ड कप में शराब की ख़रीदो फ़रोख्त पर और सरेआम पीने पर पाबंदी के तौर पर उन्हें $70 मिलियन देने का फ़ैसला किया। दूसरी तरफ हमारे पाकिस्तान में जितने भी PSL के फ्रेंचाइज है, सिर्फ इस्लामाबाद यूनाइटेड और पेशावर ज़ल्मी के अलावा जितने भी बाकी जो 4 फ्रेंचाइजेज़ है, इन सब के स्पॉन्सर्स के लिस्ट में आपको जुए वाले वेबसाइट्स देखने को मिलेंगे। अगर आपने नहीं देखा हो तो आप इस मुकम्मल वीडियो को तहकीक कर सकते हैं, आप गूगल पर इसे सर्च कर सकते हैं। इस मुकम्मल PSL को जिन लोगों ने स्पॉन्सर किया है उन कंपनीज में से एक कंपनी का नाम दफ़ा न्यूज़ है। इसको आप लोगों ने कई बार देखा होगा इन मैचेस के दौरान। इनकी एक शाख है दफ़ा बेट, ये एक मुकम्मल जुए की और एक गैम्बलिंग की वेबसाइट है। इसके अलावा कराची वालों के किट पर आप लोगों ने 1xbet की ऐड देखी होगी और 1xbet की काफ़ी सारे इश्तहार भी आप लोगों ने देखे होंगे। ये एक बैट है और दूसरा बेट है। जो वो दिखा रहे दोस्तों उस पे तो काफ़ी सारी जो स्पोर्ट्स के रिलेटेड शॉपिंग होती है, लेकिन वहीं पर इनका जो दूसरा शाख है वो मुकम्मल के मुकम्मल वो गैम्बलिंग के लिए इस्तेमाल हो रहा है। लाहौर वालों ने उनका एक स्पॉन्सर है, उनका नाम मेल्ट बेट है दोस्तों, आप वो भी देख सकते हैं। इसको अगर आप गूगल पर सर्च करें तो ये भी एक मशहूर गैम्बलिंग साइट है। मुल्तान वालों के मोहम्मद रिजवान के किट पर आप देख सकते हैं कि वोल्फ 777 नामी एक एड टाइप लगा हुआ है, एक इश्तहार है। इसको अगर आप लोग गूगल कर ले तो ये भी एक गैम्बलिंग साइट है। इसके अलावा क्वेटा वालों को MCW वालों ने स्पॉन्सर किया है जिसे मेगा कैसीनो वर्ल्ड कहते हैं, और इस्लामाबाद और पेशावर वाले जो है इन्होंने इन स्पॉन्सर्स के ख़िलाफ़ एक स्टेटमेंट भी दिया था। दोस्तों, अफसोस की बात तो ये है कि जिस ग्रुप में फेसबुक के जिस ग्रुप में मैंने ये पोस्ट देखी थी उसमें काफ़ी सारे जो कमेंट्स थे, बल्कि 95% जो कमेंट्स थे वो कुछ इस पोस्ट के मुखालिफ ही थे, यानी कि जो लोग ये आवाज़ उठा रहे थे उनके मुखालिफ ये कमेंट्स लिखे गए थे। जो लोगों ने काफ़ी सारे लोग तनकीद कर रहे थे कि फिर यूरोपीय ममालिक में जाना बंद करो, उनके साथ कारोबार करना बंद करो, वो हमें मदद देती है और उनके एड पर हम पलते हैं और उनके सहारे पर हम अब तक डिफ़ॉल्ट होने से बच गए हैं। लेकिन दूसरी तरफ अपनी यानी कि फाइनेंशियली हर कोई ये इस कोशिश में है कि मुल्क डिफ़ॉल्ट ना हो जाए और ये और वो, लेकिन जो एक दीनी जो हमारा लेवल है उसके मुताबिक हम कब का डिफ़ॉल्ट कर चुके हैं। लेकिन अफसोस की बात यह है कि उसका किसी के साथ कोई गम व फिक्र नहीं है। आज अगर हमारे मुल्क में ये इवेंट हो रहा है तो इसका फाइनेंशियली हमारे मुल्क को कितना फ़ायदा हो रहा है, या फिर इस पर जो सिक्योरिटी वगैरह इस्तेमाल हो रही है, जितने अखराजात हो रहे हैं, वल्लाहु आलिम के वो कितने ज़्यादा होंगे। यानी आप सोच सकते हैं दोस्तों, मुझे रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की एक हदीस वो याद आ गई कि जब भी एक गलत काम हो रहा हो आप कोशिश करें कि उनको हाथों से मना करें। अगर हाथ से नहीं हो सकता तो फिर उसे अपनी ज़ुबान के थ्रू आप मना करें। अगर ज़ुबान में भी नहीं कर सकते तो कम से कम अपने दिल में उसको बुरा समझें। अब अगर आप देख ले दोस्तों तो हमारे हाथ से तो रोकने वाला कोई है नहीं, ज़ुबान से भी जो मीडिया वाले हैं वो आपको कभी ऐसी बात नहीं बताएंगे, बल्कि मुझे तो अभी अपना खौफ चल रहा है, वैसे ना हो कि मुझे भी कोई स्ट्राइक ये दे दे ये लोग। लेकिन जो दिल में है वो भी हम दिल में भी इसके ख़िलाफ़ नहीं बोल सकते। तो ये इतनी हमारी यानी कि दीन से दूरी का नतीजा है कि ज़्यादातर वो लोग जो कि ज़्यादातर कमेंट्स इंग्लिश वगैरह में करते हैं, जो अपने आप को काफ़ी ज़्यादा होशियार और टैलेंटेड और एजुकेटेड समझते हैं, वो लोग भी इतने अब यानी कि ज़हनी ग़ुलामी का शिकार हो चुके हैं कि वो ये समझते हैं कि इन चीज़ों के अलावा, जुए के अलावा, गेम्बलिंग के अलावा, इनके अलावा स्पोर्ट्स का होना ये मुमकिन भी नहीं है। वरना ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं है। आप डॉक्टर जाकिर नाइक की ये मुकम्मल बात सुन ले जो इन्होंने कतर के हवाले से की है कि उन्होंने कौन कौन सी इंतज़ामात किए थे और कौन कौन सी, और जितना हो सका था उन्होंने इस्लाम की दावत दी थी। तो आप डॉक्टर जाकिर नाइक की ये मुकम्मल बयान इसके बारे में आखिर तक लाजमी देगी।
I know thousands of Muslims who play football and don't miss their salah and don't miss their psalm. They don't indulge in any haram activity. Yes, when you go to professional football at the lower level, it's very easy to avoid any haram activity and miss the faraid. When you go on a higher level, as I mentioned in the answer, that on international level, there are chances that they may ask you to advertise for alcohol or for interest-based bank, which may be haram. Of course, you can avoid this. You can say no, but you require the courage. So, it becomes more difficult to avoid the haram activity, but it is possible. So if a Muslim plays professional football and doesn't indulge in any haram activity, does not advertise for the alcohol or for a conventional bank, and doesn't indulge in any haram activity, doesn't miss any of his faraid, then football per se is not haram. And I gave this long answer, I don't intend repeating it again. And regarding anyone attending, going to Qatar, as far as I am concerned, yes, I was there in Qatar during the World Cup season. During the full month of the World Cup I was there. I was there earlier, more than a month earlier than the World Cup started, and a month later, so I was there for a few months in Qatar. Now, can anyone point out to me what haram activity did I do in Qatar? For your information, let me tell you that I did not attend a single football match during the World Cup, FIFA World Cup 2022. Yes, I wanted to attend. Not that I'm a fan of football, I'm not a fan of football, but I wanted to see the organization. It's a World Cup international event, and I have this flair to attend, to see the management, to see how it's organized. I wanted to know that how well do they have the audience in the stadium. And I know because we are involved in this activity of having the largest English Islamic conference in the world, where we had for several years the Peace Conference in Bombay, and the gathering over the 10 days was more than 1 million people. And the last day for my talk, there were 300,000 people. If you compare to the largest stadium in Qatar, the Lusail Stadium, it had a capacity of 80 to 88,000 people. That is, if you compare to the last day of the Peace Conference in my talk, there were more than 300,000 people. So it is about more than 3.5 times the audience of the largest stadium in the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022. And the largest talk that I gave in India was more than 1 million people live in one sitting, not on the social media, not on the satellite channel, live, the largest gathering that Allah blessed and with Allah's help, we were able to conduct in 2012 in Bihar, Kishanganj, more than 1 million people live in one sitting. And if you count all the 8 stadiums of Qatar during the World Cup, it had a capacity of less than 400,000 people. That means the largest gathering that we had and we conducted as an organization is more than 1 million people in one sitting, which is 2.5 times more than all the 8 stadiums of Qatar World Cup in one sitting. So it was my desire to go and attend and see how they organize, but I was a bit careful. You say ihtiyat. Because I being a Dai, I didn't want anyone to lay any allegation, so I personally did not attend a single football match, though I had access to tickets of almost all, right from the opening ceremony till the end, the quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals. I had access, I had passes, I had tickets, but I purposely did not go to avoid anyone laying any allegation. I'm not saying that going is wrong, but I being a Dai and many people follow me, I was careful because I knew what was going to happen, but I wanted to be a bit careful that I should not be caught on the wrong foot. So as far as I am concerned, I did not attend a single of any of the matches during the World Cup, FIFA World Cup 2022, which took place in Qatar. Because I know that all the earlier World Cup had many things haram, but Qatar Ahmed took care and saw to it that they tried to keep it as Islamic as possible. I'm not saying that Qatar was 100%, they held the full World Cup as per the Islamic Sharia. There were drawbacks, but comparatively if you see, normally what the World Cup takes place in other parts, it took place earlier, Qatar did a fantastic job. And they were able to demonstrate an example. So as far as the World Cup is concerned, yes, I went for doing dawah in Qatar. I stayed there for a couple of months during the World Cup season, and I had many ideas, many suggestions which I shared. Some were taken by them, some were not. And we did dawah. We were able to convince, mashallah, Allah gave hidayah to many non-Muslims, alhamdulillah. And we took this opportunity to do dawah, and of course we could have done better, but whatever was possible in the resources that were there at our disposal, we took this opportunity for doing dawah. Why does anyone say that it is haram? Yes, there may be certain acts, if you say during the World Cup that in the match may have been objectionable. That's the reason I took precaution and didn't go for the matches. But otherwise, living and doing dawah to the viewers, to the visitors, it's good, alhamdulillah. And why did anyone say that doing dawah is haram? If they say this is modern jahiliyyah, that is their thinking. And if you have an opportunity to do dawah to the jahil people, it's good. That is the time that you have to go and take advantage of it. If you compare and see what Qatar has done, they did a fabulous job in the World Cup and gave an example to the world that there is a Muslim country that can hold an international event, which is the second largest international event after Olympic. The number of people that gather together, it's the second largest, which is held every 4 years. Olympics is the largest, second largest is the FIFA World Cup, that is the football World Cup. And we are aware that most of the times that the World Cup is held, there are umpteen number of haram activities taking place. Normally, there may be thousands of haram activities that take place. If a normal Muslim would have done, maybe he would have had hundreds of haram activities. As far as a Dai is concerned, he cannot indulge in any activity, even if it's 1% haram. We don't claim that we are 100% pure, we don't make mistakes, we don't do minor sins. But as a dai, we cannot intentionally do any haram. But as a general Muslim, if he has to organize, he will do hundreds of haram. Qatar, on the other hand, alhamdulillah, I like to praise them that they did a very good, beautiful demonstration how Islamic country should hold a World Cup, international event. I'm not saying they were 100% as per the Sharia. There were drawbacks, but they were very few. On the whole, they did an excellent job. You can give a talk on that, and time will not permit me in this question and answer to talk about that. I would just like to mention a couple of things what they did, which was phenomenal, which no one else had done in the world, and no other country will have the courage or the guts to do it. Number one was, they said we will not change our culture, our religion for these 29 days or these 29 days just because the foreigners are coming or just because we are holding international event like World Cup. And they were very strict that they said we have our ethos, we have our values, we have our religion, you're most welcome, but you have to respect our views. You have to respect our religion. You have to respect our culture. And they were very clear that you may have your views, you're most welcome to follow what you want to follow in your home country. And they were very, I would say, strong. And they were very, you could say, adamant, very sure that they will maintain the Islamic ethos. And they made it very clear that people are welcome, but you cannot force your values, which we consider as sin or haram. And one most important thing that they showed to the world is they said that we have our own views as far as LGBT or LGBTQ or LGBTQI plus is concerned. And we know everything has changed now, and the groups that support the LGBTQ, lesbian, gays, bisexual, transgender, and queer, that is question, queer, and I is other things, and plus it continues, meaning anything which is not a bisexual. So they said that you may have your views, but when you come here, you cannot show your support for these things which we consider as wrong. And they were very strong in it. They did not allow anyone to flash the rainbow flag or to wear a rainbow band, and they were strict in this. And they demonstrated that you have your values, what you believe you can keep it at home, but when you come to our country, Islamic country, they were very staunch on that. And they demonstrated that. And the second thing what they did is that just 2 days before, they consulted with the FIFA committee, and they said that we will not allow the sale of alcohol in the football stadiums. And then they had a contract with an alcohol company, the Budweiser, and of course, if 2 days before they stopped the sales, it is breach of contract. So Qatar asked them that what will be your revenue? What would be your sales? Forget the profit. What would be your sales in all these 29 days? Because they were allowed to sell beer or alcohol in the World Cup. So they said about $70 million. And Qatar said, fine, we will give you $70 million. So where is the question of loss? So Qatar gave $70 million to Budweiser and told them to keep the alcohol. We don't want the alcohol, you can keep it. Or don't get it here. Imagine they have spent $70 million for a work which is alhamdulillah. That they gave a demonstration that first time in the history of FIFA World Cup that alcohol wasn't sold in the stadiums. And no one could object because the contract, they said, we will pay you the complete revenue, forget the profit. What you expect to sell in all the stadiums in 29 days, we will pay you before the World Cup starts. And they agreed to pay, and the matter was settled. And many things they did, time will not permit me, that they were able to demonstrate the Islamic aspects. And as I said, I'm not saying that 100% of the World Cup organizers were as per the Sharia. There are pros and cons. I'm only discussing the pros, and the cons are there, but they were less as compared to the pros that were there. So we take a lesson that they had the guts, and you could see in the stadium, first time in World Cup, before the ceremony starts, whether the opening or the finals, people are praying in Jamaat, in the stadium, outside the stadium. Every stadium had a prayer hall. People were praying even on the streets in large numbers. MashaAllah, it was a beautiful demonstration. And they saw to it that the people weren't obscenely dressed. It's the first World Cup. When you see the World Cup otherwise, and those who saw live on the television, I didn't see it, but those who saw live, they told me that there was a difference between the World Cup held the previous years as compared to this World Cup, that people were dressed up, not in that very obscene way. And Alhamdulillah, most of the foreigners, most of the Westerners, most of the non-Muslims that came to Qatar, they had a beautiful sample of the religion of Islam. And many of the Westerners, many of the foreigners, they told, many of the ladies, they said that we have never felt so secure in our life like we have felt in these days of the World Cup. In our own home country, we are afraid of being teased, of being, people whistling at us. And here, late in the night, it is so safe. We didn't find anyone teasing us or whistling at us. All were respectful. So it was an example of how a Muslim country, yes, if a very strong person would say objection, I do agree that there were alcohol sold in some of the areas like fan zone, etc. So these are the few negative points, but as a whole, the positive aspect that many people told, Qatar during the World Cup will be worse than Dubai, would be worse than Paris. You will find everywhere, completely there'll be lewdness, there'll be people drunk, there'll be people playing havoc, and Alhamdulillah, Qatar took care of that. People told me that hardly they could see any drunk person on the street. Maybe there were some people, but it wasn't as freely available. Alcohol was only available in the 5-star hotels and some of the zones, not like how it is available in the other World Cup. And people, mashallah, there were hardly any rate of crime during World Cup. It is the World Cup with the least rate of crime. And it, the first time in the history, when the UK fans, when they visit, they are known that there are large number of the UK fans are known to be violent, and a large number of UK fans, they get arrested. This was the first time that not a single UK fan was arrested during the full season of the World Cup. So you hardly found any crime, you hardly found any arrest. Everything went smoothly, and Qatar took care that they had security, etc. So it was a fabulous demonstration where they had tours, the non-Muslims go to the mosque, and there were, mashallah, many places where dawah could be done to the non-Muslims, and it was a good opportunity. And we did whatever we could do in our limited capacity to see to it that the message of Islam is given. So why should someone say it is haram to do dawah during World Cup? They are sitting at the home, they don't know what happened. Can anyone point out to me one act that I did which was haram in the World Cup? So the thing is, these are assumptions, and it is wrong for a Muslim to lay an allegation against any Muslim without knowing the details. Alhamdulillah, it was an event, but the cost was fabulous. The largest that any country spent during all the previous World Cup was $14.8 million spent by Russia in the last World Cup in Moscow. Qatar, there are different statistics. Some say more than 200 billion. The largest was 14.8 billion spent by Russia in the last World Cup. The stats say more than 200 billion, some say more than 260 billion. One figure told more than 300 billion. So what they spend between 200 billion to 300 billion dollars, it's a fabulous amount. It is multiple times more than all the World Cups put together. This was Qatar. Allah gave them the fund and they felt like spending it. Yes, of course, given the choice, I would spend in a different way. But if they spend this money and they felt it that they want to spend to present Islam, it is their choice. And whether it could be spent better or not is secondary. At least you cannot say that what they spent, they made an effort to give a demonstration to show to the world that Islam is a peaceful religion. It's not a religion of terrorism, as most of the people think it is. So much so that they started the inauguration with the recitation of the Quran. They had a handicap in the opening ceremony to recite the Quran and give the translation. Imagine the Western world talks about giving human rights, talking about human rights, taking care of handicaps. Not a single World Cup did you have a handicap being the main person in the opening or the closing ceremony. Here you had, alhamdulillah. So it was a beautiful demonstration, and I really appreciate the guts that Qatar had, and they were able to present Islam in a beautiful manner in one of the largest international event to show to the world that even a Muslim country can do it, and they did it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them and give them the highest reward in this world and the akhirah, and may Allah forgive whatever faults that they have done, and may Allah grant them Jannat al-Firdaus.